After paying for a meal for an elderly man at McDonald's, Clara Bell was called into the manager's office, and her life took an unexpected turn. Clara Bell tied her red apron with practiced precision and tucked a loose strand of her chestnut hair behind her ear. She glanced at the clock above the register. 8:45 a.m. It was a typical weekday, and the small diner buzzed with the usual morning crowd. Truck drivers, office workers, and retirees nursing their coffee. Clara moved quickly behind the counter, her sneakers squeaking softly on the floor as she filled mugs with steaming coffee and jotted down orders. She smiled warmly at each customer, even when the exhaustion from working back-to-back shifts threatened to wear her down. Every paycheck mattered. Clara was a single mother raising her 12-year-old son, Jamie, and every tip went toward keeping their modest home warm and ensuring Jamie had what he needed. "Order up for table 3, the cook called from the kitchen, his voice muffled by the clatter of plates. Clara grabbed the tray and delivered it to a pair of regulars, Mr. and Mrs. Carter, who always ordered pancakes and eggs sunny side up. "Here you go. Enjoy," Clara said, her voice filled with genuine cheer. She loved her job despite its challenges. The diner felt like a second home. Just as she returned to the counter, the bell above the front door jingled, signaling a new customer. An elderly man shuffled in, leaning heavily on a cane. His gray cardigan hung loosely on his thin frame, and his worn shoes hinted at the miles he had walked. His face bore the soft creases of age, but his eyes, though weary, held a quiet kindness. Clara watched as he approached the counter, his steps slow and deliberate. When he finally reached her, he looked up and gave her a shy smile. "Good morning," he said, his voice soft but clear. "I'd like a coffee and perhaps a small burger if I could." "Of course," Clara replied, already punching in the order. "Would you like anything else, sir?" The man patted his pocket with trembling hands, pulling out a handful of coins. He placed them on the counter and began counting slowly. Clara waited patiently, her smile never faltering, but her heart ached as she saw him hesitate. "Oh dear," the man muttered after a moment. "It seems I don't have enough. I must have miscalculated." He looked up, embarrassed. "I'm terribly sorry, miss. I'll just take the coffee then." Clara's heart tightened. She knew that small voice of dignity, the one that refused to admit defeat even when times were tough. Without a second thought, she reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out her wallet. "No need to worry, sir," she said quietly. "The coffee and burger are on me today." The man's eyes widened in surprise. "Oh, I can't let you do that. That's far too kind," he protested, his voice breaking slightly. "I insist," Clara replied, her tone gentle but firm. "We all need a little help sometimes. Please sit down and enjoy your meal." The man's eyes glistened with gratitude as he stammered, thank you so much." Clara quickly turned to prepare the coffee, not wanting him to feel uncomfortable. She carried the tray to a small table by the window and placed it in front of him with a warm smile. "Here you go. If you need anything else, just let me know." As the man began his meal, Clara returned to her duties, feeling a quiet satisfaction. It was a small gesture, but it felt meaningful. She didn't notice, however, the sharp gaze of her co-worker, Kelly, who had witnessed the entire exchange from the adjacent register. Kelly, a young woman with a perpetually smug expression, leaned against the counter and crossed her arms. "You know that's against policy, right?" she said, her voice low but laced with judgment. Clara glanced at her and shrugged. Sometimes doing the right thing matters more than policies. Kelly smirked but said nothing more, turning her attention back to her register. Clara thought little of it and carried on with her day, unaware of the wheels Kelly had set in motion. The elderly man finished his meal, gave Clara a grateful wave, and shuffled out the door. Clara watched him leave, a small smile playing on her lips. It felt good to help someone in need. What Clara couldn't have anticipated was how this seemingly small act of kindness would ripple outward, setting in motion a chain of events that would change her life forever. The mid-afternoon lull at McDonald's was usually Clara's favorite time of the day. The rush of the breakfast crowd had passed and the lunch regulars were long gone. She would take a moment to catch her breath, straighten the counter, and maybe sneak a quick text to her son Jamie to check if he'd eaten his packed lunch. But today was different. The air felt heavy, and Clara couldn't shake an uneasy feeling. "Clara, can I see you in my office?" Greg, the diner's manager, called from across the room. His tone was neutral, but there was a sharpness to it that made Clara pause. Her stomach tightened as she put down the glass she was wiping. "Sure, Greg," she replied, doing her best to sound calm. She walked through the narrow hallway toward his small office at the back of the diner. The walls were lined with faded certificates and pictures of McDonald's in its prime, reminders of a time when the diner was bustling and full of life. Clara stepped inside, the familiar smell of stale coffee and paper overwhelming her senses. Greg was seated behind his desk, his face hard and unreadable. "Sit," he said, gesturing to the chair in front of him. Clara sat down, folding her hands nervously in her lap. "Is something wrong?" she asked. Greg leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk. "I've been made aware of an incident earlier today," he began. "Apparently, you paid for a customer's meal out of your own pocket. Is that true?" Clara blinked, caught off guard. She hadn't expected this. "Yes, I did," she admitted. "It was an elderly man. He didn't have enough money for his burger and coffee, and I didn't want him to go hungry." Greg's eyes narrowed. "You know that's against company policy, Clara. Employees are not allowed to pay for customer orders under any circumstances." "I understand, but—" Clara started, her voice trembling. "No buts," Greg interrupted sharply. "We have policies in place for a reason. If every employee started bending the rules, we'd have chaos." Clara's chest tightened. "I wasn't trying to cause trouble. I couldn't stand by and do nothing. It felt like the right thing to do." Greg sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. "Look, I get it. You've got a big heart, Clara, but this isn't the first time you've pushed the boundaries. You've been late more times than I can count, and I've let it slide because I know about your situation with your son and your mother, but this I can't overlook." Clara's heart sank. Are you firing me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Greg nodded, his expression grim. "I'm sorry, but my hands are tied. I have to let you go." Tears welled in Clara's eyes, but she blinked them back, refusing to let them fall. "Greg, please," she pleaded. "I need this job. My son. My mother. I'll do better. I promise." Greg slid an envelope across the desk. "This is your severance pay. I wish you the best, Clara. Truly I do. But this is final." Clara stared at the envelope, her vision blurring. With trembling hands, she picked it up and stood. "Thank you for the opportunity," she said, her voice breaking. She walked out of the office, her head held high despite the tears threatening to spill. Her co-workers avoided her gaze as she grabbed her things from the break room. Even Kelly, who had reported her, looked away guiltily when Clara passed her. Once outside, Clara finally let the tears fall. She leaned against the side of the building, her breaths coming in short, ragged gasps. How was she going to tell Jamie? How would she pay the rent, the medical bills for her mother's treatments? Her mind raced with questions and fears. Clara took a shaky breath and started walking toward the bus stop. As she waited for the bus, she replayed the day's events in her mind. Doubts crept in. Had she done the right thing? Was helping that man worth losing her job? Then she remembered the gratitude in the elderly man's eyes and the way his voice had trembled with emotion when he thanked her. Yes, it was worth it, she decided. She couldn't regret showing compassion, even if the consequences were harsh. As the bus pulled up and Clara climbed aboard, she resolved to stay strong for Jamie. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew she had to keep going. What Clara didn't realize was that this moment, as painful as it was the beginning of something far greater than she could have imagined. The days after Clara's dismissal from McDonald's were marked by uncertainty and worry. She spent her time scouring job boards, sending out applications, and making lists of bills she needed to pay. Each time she glanced at Jamie, her 12-year-old son, diligently doing his homework at the kitchen table. A pang of anxiety would grip her chest. What if she couldn't find another job soon? How would she keep their modest apartment or pay for his school supplies? It was late afternoon when the phone rang, its sharp tone cutting through the oppressive silence of her small living room. Clara almost didn't answer, assuming it was another rejection, but something made her pick up. "Hello, this is Clara Bell," she said, her voice tinged with the fatigue of the past few days. "Ms. Bell, this is Robert Blake," came a calm, confident voice on the other end. "I believe you worked at McDonald's recently?" Clara froze, clutching the phone tighter. What could the owner of the franchise possibly want with her? Was this some kind of follow-up on her firing? Had she broken another unknown policy by helping Henry? "Yes, I did," she replied cautiously, her tone measured. There was a pause on the line before Robert spoke again. "I'd like to meet with you, Ms. Bell. It's regarding an important matter. Would you have time tomorrow afternoon?" Clara hesitated, confusion swirling in her mind. Important matter? What could it be? She fought the urge to pepper him with questions. "I suppose I can. Where would you like to meet?" she finally said, trying to sound composed despite her racing thoughts. "Let's meet at the corner cafe at 3 p.m. I'll reserve a table for us," Robert said warmly. Clara agreed, and after the call ended, she stared at her phone, her heart thudding in her chest. The mystery of the call made her restless, and her mind churned with possibilities. Could it be an apology? Or worse, was there some legal issue with what she'd done for Henry? "Who was that, Mom?" Jamie asked, looking up from his workbook. Clara gave him a small, reassuring smile. "Just a call about something at work, sweetheart." But the truth was, she had no idea what awaited her. The next day, Clara arrived at the corner cafe 15 minutes early. She had dressed in her best outfit, a simple navy blouse and her favorite slacks, hoping to make a good impression. Yet, as she sipped her coffee and stared at the bustling street outside, nervousness gnawed at her. She reminded herself that she had nothing to lose. At precisely 3 p.m., a man walked in. His tailored suit and confident stride made him stand out in the cozy, casual cafe. When he spotted Clara, he smiled warmly and approached her table. "Ms. Bell?" he asked, extending a hand. "Yes, that's me," Clara replied, standing to shake his hand. His grip was firm but kind. "Robert Blake," he introduced himself. "Thank you for meeting me." As they sat down, Robert ordered a coffee and then turned his attention back to Clara, his expression serious but kind. "I'll get straight to the point," he began. 2 weeks ago, you helped an elderly man named Henry at McDonald's. You paid for his meal when he didn't have enough money." Clara's stomach tightened. Here it was, the moment she feared. Was she in trouble for that? "Yes," she said cautiously. "I did. He needed help, and I didn't want him to leave hungry." Robert's expression softened, and to her surprise, a faint smile appeared. "That man is my father, Clara." Clara's breath caught. "Your father?" she repeated, stunned. "Yes. He's been struggling with early-stage Alzheimer's. Sometimes he goes out for walks and forgets things, like his wallet. That day he came home and told me about a kind woman who paid for his meal. He couldn't stop talking about how much it meant to him." Clara's eyes filled with tears. She had thought about Henry often since that day, wondering if he was okay. To hear that her small gesture had made such an impact moved her deeply. "I'm so glad to hear that he's doing well," Clara said, her voice trembling. "He reminded me of my late grandfather. I just couldn't let him leave without a meal." Robert leaned forward, his gaze sincere. "What you did was an act of true kindness, but when I learned that you were fired for it, I was outraged." Clara felt her face flush. "I didn't mean to break any rules, I just—" "Please don't misunderstand me," Robert interrupted gently. "I'm not here to reprimand you. Quite the opposite." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folder. "I came here to offer you an opportunity. Clara, I want you to come back to McDonald's, not as an employee, but as the manager." Clara stared at him, her mind struggling to process his words. "The manager?" she echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I've never been a manager before." Robert smiled. "I've done my research, Clara. Your co-workers described you as hard-working, empathetic, and reliable. Those are the qualities I value most in a leader. I believe in giving people a chance to shine, and I think you're exactly what McDonald's needs." Overwhelmed, Clara looked down at the folder he had placed in front of her. Inside were details about the position, including a salary that would make a world of difference for her and Jamie. "But why me?" she asked, tears brimming in her eyes. I'm nobody special." "You're wrong," Robert said firmly. "You're someone who made a selfless decision when it mattered most. That's what makes you special." Clara wiped her eyes, her heart swelling with gratitude. "Thank you, Mr. Blake. I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept," Robert replied with a smile. "I have no doubt you'll be great." Clara took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she picked up the pen to sign the contract. "I promise I won't let you down," she said, her voice filled with emotion. As she walked out of the cafe with the signed agreement in her bag, Clara felt a mix of hope and determination coursing through her. This was a new beginning, a chance to provide for Jamie, prove herself, and make a difference in a place she had once called her second home. What she didn't know was that this journey would be filled with challenges she couldn't yet imagine, but for the first time in weeks, Clara felt ready to face them. The next day, Clara stepped into McDonald's with a mix of excitement and trepidation. The diner looked the same as it always had: vinyl booths, the aroma of coffee and fried food, and the faint hum of conversation, but it felt different. This time, she wasn't walking in as a server, but as the new manager. Robert Blake met her at the entrance, greeting her with a firm handshake and a reassuring smile. "Good morning, Clara. Ready for your first day as manager?" Clara took a deep breath and nodded. "I think so. It's definitely a lot to take in." Robert chuckled. "Don't worry. We'll ease you into it. Today, I'll introduce you to the team in your new role and walk you through the managerial responsibilities. You'll do great." The staff gathered in the break room, their faces a mix of curiosity and skepticism. Kelly, Clara's former co-worker, stood near the back with her arms crossed, a faint smirk on her face. Lisa, one of the younger servers, smiled warmly at Clara, offering a small wave. "Good morning, everyone," Robert began. "As you all know, there have been some changes in management. I'm pleased to introduce Clara Bell as your new manager. Many of you know Clara as a dedicated team member who cares deeply about this diner and its customers. I'm confident she'll bring great leadership and positive changes." Clara stepped forward, her palms slightly sweaty. "Hi, everyone. I know this is unexpected, and I want to acknowledge that I'm just as surprised as you, but I'm also grateful for this opportunity. I've always loved working here, and my goal is to make McDonald's a better place for both the staff and our customers. I hope we can work together as a team." There was a polite smattering of applause, but Clara couldn't help noticing Kelly's raised eyebrows and whispered comment to the person next to her. Clara pushed the thought aside and focused on the more supportive faces in the room. The rest of the day was a whirlwind. Robert walked Clara through the diner's operations, from inventory management to scheduling and customer service standards. It was overwhelming at first, but Clara was determined to absorb every detail. "Remember," Robert said as they reviewed the books, "you don't have to know everything right away. Lean on your team and don't hesitate to ask for help. Leadership is about collaboration." Clara nodded, feeling a mix of nerves and gratitude. She spent the rest of the afternoon shadowing Lisa and a few other staff members, learning the flow of operations from a managerial perspective. When the dinner rush began, Clara couldn't resist jumping back into her old role. She tied on an apron and helped deliver plates, refill coffee, and clear tables. "You don't see managers doing that every day," one of the customers remarked, smiling at her. Clara smiled back, feeling a small surge of pride. "We're all part of the same team," she said simply. As the shift wound down, Clara overheard Kelly talking to another server in the break room. "Can you believe this? She's been here barely 2 years and now she's the boss?" Kelly scoffed. "I've worked here longer than her and no one's offering me a promotion." Clara paused, her heart sinking. She knew she had to address the tension head-on. Taking a deep breath, she stepped into the break room. "Kelly, can I have a word with you?" Clara asked, keeping her tone calm but firm. Kelly crossed her arms. Sure. What's up? I understand you might have some concerns about my new role, Clara began. And I want to be honest with you, I didn't ask for this position. It came as a surprise to me, too. But I'm here now, and my goal is to support everyone on this team, including you. Kelly's expression softened slightly, but her skepticism remained. We'll see how it goes, she muttered before walking out. Clara sighed, knowing it would take time to earn Kelly's trust, but she was determined to do so, not just for herself, but for the sake of the team. At the end of the day, Clara sat in the manager's office reviewing schedules and jotting down notes for the next day. The work was challenging, but she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in years. As she closed her notebook, Lisa poked her head into the office. Clara, I just wanted to say, I think it's great you're our new manager. You've always been so kind and hardworking. If you need any help, let me know. Clara smiled, her heart warming at the support. Thank you, Lisa. That means a lot. As she locked up the diner and stepped out into the cool evening air, Clara reflected on the day. It hadn't been perfect, but it was a start. For the first time in a long time, she felt hopeful about the future, not just for herself, but for her son Jamie and the team at McDonald's. The journey was just beginning, but Clara was ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Clara arrived at McDonald's early the next morning, determined to make her mark as the new manager. She had spent the previous evening going over employee schedules, inventory lists, and customer feedback notes. With her notepad tucked under her arm and a steaming cup of coffee in hand, she was ready to dive into the day. The diner buzzed with activity as the breakfast rush began. Clara noticed Kelly giving her side glances as she worked the register. Other employees seemed cautiously optimistic, but Kelly's skepticism hung in the air like a cloud. Clara decided to address it indirectly by leading by example. She jumped into the thick of things, helping the kitchen staff, bussing tables, and chatting with customers. When the morning rush died down, she gathered the team for a quick meeting in the break room. Thank you all for your hard work this morning, Clara began. I know things have been a little uncertain with the recent changes, but I want you to know that I'm here to support you. If there's anything you need, whether it's better scheduling, additional resources, or just someone to listen, I'm your manager, but I'm also your teammate. The group nodded politely, but Clara noticed Kelly whispering to another co-worker and rolling her eyes. Clara chose not to call her out, but she knew she couldn't let this behavior continue indefinitely. Over the next week, Clara focused on making small but impactful changes to improve the diner's environment. She adjusted schedules to ensure fairer shifts, particularly for employees who had other commitments like school or caregiving. She also introduced regular staff meetings where employees could voice their concerns and ideas. One day, during a team meeting, Lisa tentatively raised her hand. Clara, I was wondering, could we have a suggestion box for customers? Sometimes they tell us things, but it doesn't always make it back to the manager. Clara smiled. That's a great idea, Lisa. Let's set one up this week. Kelly, however, remained resistant. She openly questioned Clara's decisions during meetings, often with a sarcastic tone. A suggestion box? Next, we'll be painting rainbows on the walls. Kelly quipped one afternoon, earning a few nervous chuckles from other employees. Clara stayed calm. Kelly, I understand you're skeptical about some of these changes. I'd love to hear your ideas, too. Let's talk after this meeting. When the meeting ended, Kelly lingered reluctantly. Look, Kelly said, crossing her arms. I've been here a lot longer than you. I know how things work around here. These changes you're making, they're just going to slow us down. Clara met her gaze evenly. Kelly, I respect your experience and I value your input. But we're a team, and the goal is to make this diner a better place for everyone. Staff and customers. I'd appreciate your support in that. Kelly didn't respond, but her expression softened slightly. Clara hoped it was a step in the right direction. One evening after closing, Clara stayed late to help the kitchen staff deep clean the diner. As she scrubbed the counters and cleaned out the fryers, the staff began to notice her dedication. Lisa whispered to another server, "She really means it when she says she's part of the team." The turning point came during a particularly busy lunch shift. A large group of unexpected customers walked in, overwhelming the staff. Kelly was struggling to keep up at the register, and the kitchen was falling behind on orders. Clara immediately jumped in, managing the chaos with calm efficiency. She helped Kelly with the register, delivered plates to tables, and reassured customers about delays. After the rush ended, the staff gathered in the break room, exhausted but relieved. Kelly, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "I have to admit," she said, her voice hesitant, "you handled that really well. I didn't think we'd make it through without complaints, but you proved me wrong." Clara smiled, grateful for the acknowledgement. "Thank you, Kelly. We made it through because we worked together. That's what this place is all about." By the end of the week, Clara began to see a shift in the team's attitude. Employees who had been skeptical of her leadership started warming up, and Kelly's resistance began to fade. Clara knew there was still a long way to go, but she felt encouraged by the progress. On her way out one evening, Lisa stopped her. "Clara, I just wanted to say, I think you're doing a great job. The diner feels different, in a good way." Clara's heart swelled with gratitude. "Thank you, Lisa. That means a lot." As Clara walked home that night, she reflected on the challenges she had faced and the victories she had won. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, she felt like she was truly making a difference, not just for the diner, but for the people who worked there. And that, Clara thought, was worth every moment of struggle. Clara had just started her morning routine at McDonald's when a knock on the office door startled her. It was Lisa, her eyes wide with concern. "Clara, there's a man here asking for you. He says he's from the accounting department of the franchise." Clara's stomach tightened. She wasn't expecting anyone. "Thanks, Lisa. I'll handle it." She walked out to find a man in a crisp gray suit standing near the counter. He introduced himself as Martin Hayes, an auditor for McDonald's's parent company. His demeanor was professional but firm, and Clara could sense that this wasn't a casual visit. "Ms. Bell," he began, "I'm here to conduct an internal review of the diner's financial records. We've identified some discrepancies in the quarterly reports, and we need your cooperation." Clara felt a cold wave of dread wash over her. "Of course, Mr. Hayes, I'll give you access to everything you need." For the next several hours, Martin pored over financial records while Clara worked alongside him, pulling receipts, invoices, and balance sheets. At first, everything seemed routine, but as the day went on, Martin's expression grew grimmer. "These entries don't add up," he said, pointing to a series of transactions. "It looks like funds were diverted into an unlisted account." Clara leaned over the documents, her brow furrowing. She hadn't noticed these irregularities before, but now that they were laid out in front of her, they were glaringly obvious. "Do you think this happened before I became manager?" she asked hesitantly. Martin nodded. "Most likely. These discrepancies started months before you were promoted, but as the current manager, you'll need to assist us in investigating further." Clara felt the weight of the situation settle on her shoulders. Not only was her own reputation at stake, but the future of the diner and the livelihoods of her staff hung in the balance. That evening, as Clara sifted through more records in her office, she found a hidden folder tucked behind an old filing cabinet. Inside were handwritten notes and altered spreadsheets that painted a clearer picture of the financial fraud. To her shock, the name Kelly appeared on several documents along with the signature of the former manager, Greg. Clara's heart sank. Kelly had been part of the diner for years, and despite their rocky relationship, Clara hadn't suspected her of wrongdoing. But the evidence was undeniable. Kelly and Greg had been siphoning funds for personal use. A knock on the door startled her. It was Martin. "I've found enough to escalate this to the authorities," he said gravely. "Do you want to call your staff together, or should I?" Clara hesitated. Her instincts told her to be transparent, but she also worried about how the news would impact her team. Finally, she nodded. "I'll talk to them. They deserve to hear it from me." Clara called an emergency staff meeting after closing hours. The employees gathered in the dining area, their expressions a mix of confusion and apprehension. Kelly leaned against the counter, her arms crossed, her face unreadable. Clara took a deep breath and began. I need to share some difficult news. During a routine audit, we discovered financial irregularities in the diner's accounts. These issues date back to before I became manager, but they've come to light under my watch. The room buzzed with murmurs, and Clara raised her hand to quiet them. Evidence has been found linking these irregularities to the former manager, Greg, she continued, and to Kelly. Gasps filled the room and Kelly's face turned pale. What? That's ridiculous, she snapped. You're just trying to pin this on me because you can't handle being in charge. Clara remained calm, though her heart pounded. I wish that were the case, Kelly, but the evidence is clear. I'm asking you to cooperate with the investigation. Kelly glared at her, but she said nothing more. The tension in the room was palpable. After the meeting, Martin approached Clara. I'll notify the authorities and handle the legal side. You've done well, Ms. Bell. But Clara wasn't sure she felt any relief. She couldn't help but feel for the other employees who would be affected by the scandal. Would customers lose trust in the diner? Would her team lose their jobs? The next morning, Clara sat at her desk staring at a blank notepad. She needed a plan, not just to weather the storm, but to restore the diner's reputation and protect her team. She picked up her pen and began to write. Over the next few days, Clara worked tirelessly to balance the investigation with keeping the diner running. She met with each staff member individually to reassure them and hear their concerns. Lisa was particularly worried. Do you think we'll lose our jobs, Clara? Clara placed a reassuring hand on Lisa's shoulder. I won't let that happen. We're going to come out of this stronger, I promise. As the investigation progressed, Kelly eventually admitted her role in the fraud, implicating Greg as the mastermind. She expressed remorse, but Clara knew the damage had been done. Kelly resigned, and Clara promised herself that she would ensure a fair process for everyone moving forward. Despite the challenges, Clara's transparency and leadership began to earn the trust of her staff and customers. She held a meeting with Robert Blake, the franchise owner, to discuss the next steps. Clara, Robert said, I know this has been an incredibly difficult time, but you've handled it with grace and integrity. I trust you to lead this diner through its recovery. Clara felt a swell of determination. Thank you, Robert. I won't let you, or this team, down. As she walked back into the diner, Clara looked around at her staff. They were tired, but resilient, and she knew they were ready to move forward together. The storm wasn't over, but for the first time, Clara saw a path to brighter days ahead. The morning dawned crisp and clear, but Clara's heart felt heavy as she prepared for one of the most challenging days of her life. Today, she would face not only her staff but the wider community. Transparency had been her choice, and now she would see if it was the right one. She stood in the center of the dining area at McDonald's, surrounded by her team. Their expressions ranged from nervous to supportive, but every eye was on her. Even Robert Blake, the franchise owner, stood at the back of the room observing quietly. Thank you all for being here, Clara began, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. As most of you know, we've been dealing with a difficult situation. Financial irregularities were uncovered, and while the investigation has revealed these issues began before my time, I am still the current manager, and the responsibility ultimately falls to me. She paused, meeting the eyes of each person in the room. I want to be honest with all of you. Mistakes were made and trust was broken, but I believe we have a chance to fix this, together. It won't be easy, but if we stay committed to integrity, I know we can rebuild what was lost. The room was silent for a moment before Lisa, one of Clara's most loyal employees, spoke up. We're with you, Clara. You've always been up front with us, and we trust you. Others murmured their agreement, and Clara felt a swell of gratitude. She glanced at Mark, a newer employee who had initially been skeptical of her leadership. He nodded slowly, a small smile on his face. Thank you, Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. Now, let's talk about how we move forward. That afternoon, Clara and Robert stood outside the diner as journalists and curious customers gathered. A few protesters held signs, demanding accountability. Clara took a deep breath and stepped forward, ready to address them. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice carrying across the small crowd. "My name is Clara Bell, and I'm the manager of McDonald's. Over the past few weeks, our diner has been the subject of an investigation into financial misconduct. Today, I want to share the truth with you." She explained everything: the fraudulent activities, the steps taken to uncover them, and the measures being put in place to prevent future issues. "I understand if some of you feel betrayed. I feel the same way. But I want you to know that we are committed to making things right. Transparency will be at the heart of everything we do moving forward." A reporter raised her hand. "Ms. Bell, do you believe the diner can recover from this?" Clara took a moment before answering. "I don't just believe it, I know it, because this isn't just a restaurant, it's a community. And with your support, we can make McDonald's a place we can all be proud of." Applause broke out, and Clara felt tears prick her eyes. The crowd began to disperse, some approaching her to offer words of encouragement. One elderly woman, who had been a regular customer for years, took Clara's hand and said, "You've got guts, dear. We'll stand by you." Over the following weeks, Clara and her team worked tirelessly to rebuild trust. They introduced a public ledger system, allowing customers to see exactly where their money was going. They also hosted community nights, offering discounts and free meals to foster goodwill. Lisa led a fundraiser to support local schools, and Mark took charge of a recycling initiative, transforming the diner into a hub of ethical practices. Even Robert pitched in, helping with repairs and brainstorming new ideas. Gradually, the diner's reputation began to recover. Customers returned, drawn by Clara's honesty and the diner's renewed commitment to the community. One day, Robert called Clara into his office. "Clara, I've been watching you these past months, and I'm impressed. You've turned a dire situation into a remarkable success. I'd like to offer you a new role, overseeing ethical practices across all my franchises." Clara's breath caught. It was an incredible opportunity, but it would mean leaving McDonald's. She hesitated before replying, "I'm honored, Robert, but my heart is here. I want to continue building what we've started." Robert smiled. "I thought you might say that. How about this? You stay here, but you also lead a pilot program from McDonald's. We'll implement your ideas across the franchise, starting with this diner." Clara's face lit up. "That sounds perfect. Thank you, Robert." A year later, McDonald's hosted a celebration for its transparency anniversary. The restaurant was packed with employees, customers, and community members. Clara stood at the front, watching her son Jamie laugh with Mark and Lisa as they served slices of cake. As the evening wound down, Jamie approached Clara. "Mom, I'm so proud of you. You've shown me what it means to do the right thing, even when it's hard." Clara smiled, bending down to hug him. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" she said, her voice filled with gratitude. This wasn't just a diner anymore, it was a symbol of what kindness, integrity, and determination could achieve. Clara's act of compassion had sparked a ripple effect that touched countless lives. It reminded her, and everyone who walked through those doors, that even the smallest acts of kindness could create monumental change. Turning to the camera crew documenting her story for the local news, Clara addressed the viewers directly. "To everyone watching, remember this: life will throw challenges your way, but when you choose kindness, integrity, and the courage to do what's right, amazing things can happen." This journey started with one small act of compassion, and it's proof that even in the darkest times, we can be the light. If you found this story as heartwarming and inspiring as we did, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing tales of resilience, love, and the unexpected twists life has to offer. Click the link below to watch another story that will touch your heart. See you next time.